All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rise and Elevate with myself, Devin Pinches, and my co-host Tom Fox with AnnieMac Home Mortgage. We are on episode 5. Tom and I have had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with real estate and mortgage, industry leaders, learning about, their successes and setbacks, and hopefully this podcast, is able to resonate with, our viewers and teach some new things on how to approach success and failures. Tom, welcome. So excited to have you again.
Absolutely. Devin, thanks so much. And, this journey started with just a conversation about how we can add value to our peers, to our friends, to our families, and how we can deliver a message, right? Sometimes it's a message of hope. And we've used the stories of our guests with their successes and failures, or setbacks, as some like to call it, and how it helps to shape the next chapter for all of us. So one of the things that we've used as a bit of a tagline is a rising ship or a rising tide lifts all ships. And that's something that we want to share that message and help to share those thoughts that help us to share the message of hope and to have everything moving forward in a positive direction. So today we are very excited to have on our 5th episode a very influential person who's become a part of my life. He's also welcomed my son into the industry. And without further ado, Devin, if you would make the introduction, I'm really excited about this guest.
Absolutely. So today we are thrilled to introduce a very special guest, Joe Panebianco, the CEO and founder of AnnieMac Home Mortgage. Joe has built a company on a powerful mission, right? Creating meaningful value for borrowers, employees, referral partners, and communities alike. Before founding AnnieMac, Joe's impressive career spanned roles as a senior portfolio manager, a chief marketing strategist for ABFS, managing member of Village Capital and Investment, and COO of Gateway Funding DMS. Each of these roles contributed to Joe's unique perspective and commitment to driving positive change in the mortgage industry. Please welcome us with Joe Panebianco. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. You guys hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah, you
perfect.
hear it great. Joe,
Great.
thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. As the leader and founder of AnnieMac, you've definitely provided a pathway for many to take it to the next level. And we just had the pleasure of sharing some time together at the AnnieMac Sales Summit in Atlantic City. And I wanted to thank you for the opportunities that you continue to provide. And the way that you lead our company is really something to look up to.
That's great. And given that introduction, Devin, I appreciate given that intro, Tom. I need to get you guys to call me every day so I can wake up to that type of great. Because you certainly don't get it from you certainly don't get that kind of stuff from your kids. So I appreciate it.
That's hysterical.
Well, being a father is one of the things that you have shared with us that is one of your greatest successes. And being a father of twins, I know that mine are 23 years old now, and I'm facing different challenges and new hurdles with them as we go. But share with me what it's meant to be a father, because certainly you've had a lot of great roles, but that's one that, people certainly can equate to regardless of where you are in your life.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, being a dad is, you have jobs. You have, you could be a CEO, you could be a loan officer, you could be a branch manager, you could be a doctor, and that's what you do. But being a father is what you are, right? And that's the distinction that I would say between that. So, it's a meaningful part of my life. I'm proud to be a father, for sure. Proud of all my kids, but I would say, it is, I'm not ashamed to say, at the very top of my hierarchy in terms of my why, right? You've got to have a why. Yep. And when anyone who tells you this is an easy business is lying to you. So some days you need a why, right? And I'm blessed that I can look to my children and find my why on a daily basis, even if they are against me and not treating me as well as you and Devin.
Maybe they can learn, the intro we gave you this morning, Joe. But may I ask, What values do you hope to pass on to your children?
So interesting enough, one of my, I wouldn't call it success, but one of the things that's driven me forward in terms of a value system is, I've been a study and practicing Stoic for 10 years now. And the values that I replicate today, the same values that were used 2,000 years ago, and then 1,000 years before that, right? So it's very easy. It's, focusing on, the core virtues of love, work, and energy, right? And that's the value system I try to impose upon so who do I want to be at work? What's my best self at work? What's my best self in the love category, which will include everyone in your life that you care about. And then, of course, at what energy level, at what level are you vibrating that you can get all those things done? So those are the sort of the value system, I would say, the components of what I try to inject into my family life and my professional life. And it's served me well.
Joe, as part of the Stoic philosophy and the teachings, I know that Marcus Aurelius is one that is associated commonly with it. He's not really the founder, but, before him in Greek philosophy, there were others that went before him. Zeno of Cytinium is one that is, credited with so much of it. And one of the things that I love that I've read recently about that, based on you sharing that with us, is the whole idea of self-control. Yep. And controlling the controllables, right? We don't always control what happens to us, but we can control our attitude, how we respond instead of reacting to things. And, in this business, in the mortgage world, we've seen a lot of roller coasters, right? We've been through the ups and downs of 2008. We've been through 2014 and COVID. How would you say that as a leader of a company that supports hundreds of employees, how would you say that you've used some of those core values to lead the company when there's unknown and change in front of us?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start with saying that it's an interesting analog that you brought up, Zeno, because he found himself shipwrecked, and it was then when he decided he got more of a sense of the things you can control in your life, right? He was doing some sort of trading, and he got shipwrecked, and he wound up discovering Stoicism that way. And you could say in a lot of ways that our industry shipwrecked on March of 2022, right? And found itself, on the shores and in bits and pieces. So what do you do? It's very difficult. It's easy. It's very easy to say these things like control, focus on what you control and control your controllables and things like that. But how do you implement that, right? Because we are surrounded by noise constantly. So the best way to do that, in my opinion, is you really have to focus very carefully on the difference between the signal and the noise. And what I mean by that is there is a signal within that statement. And that signal is, do you really understand what you should be doing on a day-to-day basis, right? And then the noise is things that are both good and bad. So here's bad noise. The people who are complaining about things. We're all surrounded with those people in our lives. You're focused on the news or the media or whatever else is going on in your world, because you're submersed in it, right? But some of the stuff that's also noise, and it's a challenging thing to talk about, is really, your significant others, your family, your friends. Like, everyone is pulling you away from the signal, and they're trying to pull you into the noise. And doesn't mean that they're bad. They're definitely not. They're amazing people, but everyone wants something. I would say that the best way for me to qualify the statement signal through the noise is you have to say no to a whole bunch of things. Some of them are meaningful and some of them are not. And that creates in your world an imbalance, right? But I would argue that you're always imbalanced. The question is, can you balance time with your family and only be with your family? It's being present in the moment, right? And then when you're in balance, can you devote yourself completely to work? And an imbalance can persist for days or weeks or months, but you just need to find that balance. So in our industry, you just have to go out there and constantly remind people of one, what they should be focusing in on. Two, I think that gratitude and perspective plays an enormous role in your ability to hear the signal through the noise, because regardless of how bad the industry may have been, and might still be very challenging. I would tell you that of the 7 billion people on this planet, there are 6.8 billion that would kill for the life you have today.
Sure.
We don't really think about that, but I mean, you could go
Right.
from, there are plenty of great countries in the world. So it's, I'm not necessarily believe that the United States is the only place, plenty of wonderful. I just had the great blessing of visiting my daughter, who's a semester away in Copenhagen. And I can tell you, it's a wonderful place, and you can go to different, islands, magnificent. But the reality of it is, you could look at vast swaths of the world and look at the way they live and look at our lives. And so it's a long-winded way of saying perspective is absolutely crucial to being able to control your controllables, and making sure that when it's time to push the husband or wife or girlfriend or boyfriend away for a little bit, to make sure you focus. When it's time to make sure that your kids are fine, but you need to work, you do that. And then to make sure that you get back in balance, and sometimes you need to make sure that you're present with them as well. And people will get it. I think people would prefer quality over quantity. I'd say they would prefer quality over watered down quantity.
Sure.
That's what I would say.
And Joe, do you use time blocking to help you to keep that balance or restore that balance so that you can focus on what is most important at the time?
I live a very structured life, and that's the only way that I can do it. So
Right.
I follow what I have what I call a masterpiece day template. It's all about time blocking, and it's all about making sure that I'm engaged in a process, right? So
Right.
I would say, if you speak to most people, they say, "Hey, I've got this goal, and I'm shooting. Everyone's asking, what's your goal? What's your goal?" But really, what people should be asking is, not just what your goal is, but what are your systems? It's all well and good to have a goal and a business plan, and I've never seen a business plan that didn't look great. No one ever showed me a business plan. So listen, I'm gonna build this year, right? It's the
Right.
business plan looks like, okay, I'm here, and then by the end of the year, somehow it's up here, right? And then you ask them the basic question: what are the systems that you're putting in place to make sure that this occurs? You usually get a blank stare.
Right.
So that would be my response to that. It's
Right. And I think that's really important. So Joe, there's something that you and Devin share, and perhaps maybe not some of your proudest or shining moments, but Devin and you shared a bit of loss in terms of not passing the goal that you had set. Joe, you shared with us that you just narrowly failed the eye test for the Air Force. And Devin, you just missed becoming British police.
Yeah.
Right? So Joe, tell me how that setback or failure really helped you to move forward.
So what happened with me, I was about 2 weeks away from going to officer candidate school in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a final eye exam, and lo and behold, I had something wrong with one of my eyes that made it impossible for me to pursue that. And in retrospect, probably the best thing that happened to me in some way or shape or form, because when you're knocked, so sometimes you're bumped out of your comfort zone a little bit here and there, but when you're knocked completely out of your comfort zone, and now you're in some unknown space of, no direction. Because when you think you have, and we've all on some level witnessed it, whether it be, the death of a family member, or, a failure of a business, or whatever it may be. Every once in a while you are, if you consider your comfort zone, this nice cozy circle, and you're in the middle of it, sometimes you're bumped around it, and then sometimes you're not completely out of it. And when you're not completely out of it, you have two choices. You could either move forward, or you can get stuck. And so if you can learn to move forward through those things, and find a new path, it can be an exhilarating thing. And I will tell you that if anyone ever has the chance to listen to a Steve Jobs interview he gave at a college, I think he went to Radcliffe or Radnor College, if I remember correctly. He talks about that a little bit, saying it's only in retrospect that you can turn around and look at your past and say, thank God that happened. And that was, whether it was meant to be or whatever, but you can actually directly point to the things in your life that made you who you are today. And Devin, I can imagine the same thing with you.
Absolutely. I thought at the time, I must admit, I was devastated that, I didn't get into the British police. It was the math exam that let me down, but it wouldn't have brought me right here where I'm sitting today and living the life that I envisioned in South Florida and doing now what I love. So I mean, at the time, it can definitely be a setback, but as you said, it knocks you for six, right? And then brings you into a new path. And something I'd like to touch on with you, Joe, is you mentioned, I think it was setting unreasonable goals, right? I mean, most ambitious people struggle, setting high expectations and facing disappointments, right? When we don't meet them. What have you learned from setting unreasonable goals, and how do you approach goal setting today? I know you mentioned, what's your systems in place, but would you mind just touching on that a little bit deeper?
Yeah. You have to really understand there's a difference between a stretch goal,
Hmm.
right? And an aspirational goal, right? I would
Okay.
say so. An aspirational goal is something that you would by definition aspire to be at some point. So let's assume you were fairly sedentary and you weren't exercising. To say that in 2 weeks I'm going to run the New York City Marathon is
Mm,
probably a bit of an aspect. It's probably not realistic. But to say that I'm going to get up and really push myself to do 2 miles in 3 weeks. So it's really, and the old saying, reach for the stars and sometimes you get the moon. You've heard that, right?
mhm.
Um,
Yes.
Right.
I think what I got stuck in sometimes is, I would take the approach, reach for the edge of the universe and maybe you'll fall on a star. And that's not a
Right.
great approach, right? You,
Sure.
everything, the path up the top of the mountain is just to look at one step at a time as you go and not try to gaze all the way at the top. And I would say, I've had a number of setbacks, personally and professionally, because you have these unreasonable expectations of what you can accomplish over the short term.
Right.
Short term. I am a believer that you can accomplish anything over the long term. Like, you're never going to jump off a building and be able to fly. No matter how many times you try, you probably only get one shot at it, right? But,
Right.
but having said that, if you want to do something, you just need to be more measured in your approach in terms of goal setting, right?
Right.
And that's been a humbling lesson for me several times.
So, Joe, do you think that the goal setting kind of falls into or follows along with having a good work ethic? You've talked about the work ethic is important. How do you find the motivation to continue that work ethic on a regular basis, even if you've fallen short of some of your goals?
Yeah. So you really need to. So more often than not, people, at least I'm not saying people, I'm very critical of my failures. Not necessarily in an abusive way to myself, but I tend to, I rip them apart to try to learn from them.
Right.
And the biggest failure of all is when you didn't even know you did, and someone either brings to you or you find out later on. But how you stay, how you continue that path is just to make sure that you also celebrate the little wins. Right. You have to recognize that every single day you have little wins. And so you structure your day in such a way so that you get the most difficult things done early in the morning, right? I don't care what it is that you have to do. If you have to make that phone call, let that client down, try to make 10 prospecting calls, the thing that you don't want to do, get done early in the morning. There's another great book by an admiral, I have to remember. It's called Make Your Bed. And he tells a story about how every day he gets up and he makes his bed because at the very least, he's accomplished something. And at the end of the day, no matter how bad the day was, he's got a nice made bed he can come back to at night.
Right.
So that's how you keep moving forward. You just keep making sure you do the right things. They're not always going to be successful, but at least you've knocked it out. And that gives you, the courage of, what is it the realtors say, or we say as well? It's know, like, and trust.
Right.
Like if you want to get business from somebody, they have to know you, they have to like you, and ultimately that they have to trust you. Right.
Right.
But really, to answer your question, Tom, like you have to ask yourself, do you really know yourself? Do you really like yourself? And more importantly, do you really trust yourself? If you don't trust yourself, you're not going to be able to get other people to trust you. And by doing those things consistently on a daily basis, you will begin to trust yourself.
Right.
People pick up on that. I'm a big believer in the energy that people put out there. Not in a sort of cliche, but I really believe that humans interact with one another sometimes at an unspoken level. They can sense, have you ever seen someone, they look a little sad, or you pick up on that stuff, and people can pick up on people who trust themselves to do the right thing, and therefore they trust you.
Right. I think that's brilliant. I'd like to read when in part of the summit that we did, Tim Brahim, quoted, and it's something that I originally had thought was something that came from Zig Ziglar, who's a motivational, inspirational leader in this space. But I learned that it came from Marcus Aurelius, and it says, we only get what we want when we help others get what they want. And I think part of the message of what you've been sharing us is that you've been, understanding who you are and what your limitations and successes and where you've been are, but you're also helping others in our company to feel the confidence that they can go forward and make progress and move in the right direction because you've put the systems, the tools, the people together, right? You had shared with us that surrounding yourself with good people is one of the things that you're most proud of. Share with me how you get to understand having the right people. How do you find the right people?
So I'm a believer that most people are good. I honestly believe that. And I believe that if you give most people a chance, they will try to succeed. They will do their best to succeed. So finding the right people, finding good people, I think is easy. Now, what's challenging is finding the right person for the position that you need to fulfill. And I say it's more challenging is having those discussions with people when they've reached their limitation and you need to bring somebody else in to take them that next mile, right?
Right.
So, how do you do that? I think one, you start by putting your best foot forward. I'm a big fan of saying if you always put your best foot forward, you would better expect it to get stepped on every once in a while.
Right.
More likely than not, people, if you give people agency, autonomy, and support, they'll surprise you on the upside.
Right.
And over time, if you start with 1,000 people, over time, you will find that group shrink because some people can't, some people won't, and some people don't. But the best thing you can do once you find those people is keep them very close. And again, I still believe that you keep them close by being the best you can be for them. And sometimes your foot does get stepped on, and that's okay. But if you can put your head down at night, I think people would. I think the great answer to is it better be loved or feared? Is loved, because when you're feared, when you're in a tough situation and you're at a point of weakness, people will run. Right. When you're loved, when you really need people, they're there for you.
Right. And that kind of goes along with the whole concept of having a coach, right? Continuing to look for knowledge and growth. I feel like there's times where you get to a point where you're stuck and you need someone else's perspective or you need new knowledge or new growth. And I understand you're still studying to progress towards that pursuit of that, that noble degree or that higher level. Tell us a little bit about what you're continuing to do to increase your learning foundation.
Yeah. So you're right. If you're not continuously learning, you're missing one of the key tenets of life, right? I mean, there's so much that we just don't know. Why would you not? There's a great story I'll bring up about Marcus Aurelius, where he is an old man at this point and he's walking off in the days where an emperor could literally walk through the streets and not, he's carrying a bunch of books and someone says, where are you going? And he says, I'm going to see Sextus to learn that which I do not yet know. As an old man, this is where he was at, right? So what am I doing? I'm still studying philosophy on an academic level. I've taken off the last year, given what's going on in our industry, to really focus. Because again, sometimes you have to be out of balance, and this is a time where we're out of balance. But just next week, I have a coach and I'm part of a coaching organization called Heroic, led by this gentleman Brian Johnson. And I'm going to Athens, Greece in 3 or 4 days to study in the Colosseum, even at Aristotle's Old Lyceum, just to reconnect and set goals and strategies and get perspective, right, and learn. And I think, if you think you don't have time to learn anything, then you really need to start learning. Like it's one of those things where if you don't even understand that you need to learn, then you really need to sort of dig in a little bit more, just give it a chance. But yeah, it's just a constant growth. And there's nothing that I haven't studied, regardless of what it is, that I haven't found some way to implement in that, work, love, and energy sphere. You're always, you have to, I would say the best thing I could say about this topic, then I'll move on, is, we are not just studiers, we're not just philosophers, right? You also have to be executors, right? So don't be a librarian of the mind, as they often say, be out there and actually put stuff that you learned to use, and you'd be amazed at how useful that stuff is.
Well, there's a saying about, if you need something done, give it to a busy person, right? Because the doers do, right? And I find that sometimes, Joe, I'm always doing, right? But I find that sometimes I need to slow down a little bit. I need to be reflective about what I've done. And quite frankly, sometimes we need to be, and you said critical of yourself, sometimes we need to be critical of how we responded or reacted in a situation so that we can learn from it, right? Are you someone that believes in journaling?
I journal every day.
Okay.
Every day, and twice a day. So I journal before I go to bed.
Right.
So my day, so today is the 30th. So for me, the 31st really starts the night of the 30th.
Right.
Okay.
So journaling starts with, I have a full understanding of what my next day looks like, what my one thing is, and the things that, I need to accomplish. So by doing that, you step into your day. You don't wake up and figure your day out, right? And it also eliminates a lot of decision fatigue. Decision fatigue meaning the decision's already made for you. So you're fresh, you're ready to go, and you just jump into it.
Right.
And then at night you journal, and you discuss, you be honest with you. What didn't I do? What did I do wrong? What could I do better? And, what did I do right? Right. And those 4 or 5 simple questions, and it's, it works out. It works out really well.
It's a great way to kind of chart your growth, or just to be critical of where you're going, and are you keeping up with your goals and your mindset, right? I'm a big believer that a positive mindset can certainly help us to overcome things that might be monumental if we think about them as an insurmountable, challenge. And that mindset is something that I believe that, and that energy that you talk about is something that we try to share and we give to not only our clients, but our family and everyone that's here with us on this journey. So Joe, I'd like to ask you, just what do you see happening in the next year, 2025, in the mortgage industry? And certainly just a little bit of insight so that we can share with those around us what you believe is on the precipice of, our industry.
Okay. Probably not a popular view, but I do believe that the industry is still going through a process, right?
Sure.
So without being too lengthy here, I'll tell you that, when you shut the economy off completely, and then you inject it with a quadruple dose of adrenaline in terms of $4 or $5 trillion worth of stimulus, stuff's going to happen, right?
Sure.
And so we've gotten ourselves in a position where, the MBS composition is upside down, right? Housing is priced very high, and rates are still high. People, I get a chuckle out of when people say, well, in 1987 rates were, but home prices were also $25,000. Like, it's a different world. It gets down to affordability. So, we are getting through that process of what I call normalization, right? But where we are in the process, I think where people thought 2, 3, 4 months ago that we were in the bottom of the ninth, I don't see that as the case. I see it's more sort of in the 6th or 7th inning. We still have a ways to go. So in terms of 2025, the phrase that I have coined for myself is sort of, potentially short feast, long famine. Right. Okay. So there will be periods of times where it'll look like things are slowing and improving, or there's some exogenous event, God forbid, offshore or on here that creates rates to rally. And I think better as an organization, be prepared to take advantage of that, because they're likely to fade almost as quickly as they've come. We've seen 2 instances of that already. I see no reason to see that that's not going to occur.
Right.
The U.S. economy fundamentally is still very strong, even though there are definitively pockets pockets of challenge out there. You know, and so what you have is you could argue how restrictive the Fed is, but the Fed is clearly restrictive if you just want to look at the very basic fundamentals of economics, and so, it's like you're slowing your car at 70 miles an hour and not knowing how hard you're hitting on the brakes, but you definitively know you're hitting the brakes, right? So
Right.
during the process of trying to figure out, that second rate of change, right? That second derivative, how fast are we slowing, so to speak? There's going to be some bumps. So, going through 2025, the likelihood that we get more normal as each passing quarter goes is definitively where we're heading. But if I had to give any advice to folks out there, I'd say you've got to be ready. This is not the time to, spend, engage in profligate spending on things that don't. It's not the time to, go back to the way it was in terms of 2020, in terms of
Right.
your staffing, your expense. You still have to be smart. You still have to have the tools, resources, and products that can focus on buyers, especially when it comes to stretched affordability. You need to have tools and mechanisms to penetrate markets that both lack inventory and have demand, and markets, notably areas of Florida and area of Texas, that are just starting to face inventory challenges. So that would be my 2025 guidance for folks in a nutshell.
So focus and discipline are probably two tools that we need to use to continue to be successful in this business, right?
And I'll quantify that by saying, focus on the activities that will drive your business forward, and the discipline to do those activities on a consistent basis.
I love it. Joe, I want to thank you very much for spending the time with us.
Yeah.
The Rise and Elevate podcast. This is our 5th episode. We're really excited about continuing. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your insight, some stories, and we really appreciate the fact that you shared this time with us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Just do me one favor. When Spotify bumps Joe Rogan for this podcast, let me be one of the first guests.
That would be amazing. We're told that if we can make it to 200 episodes, we're guaranteed to be successful. So
that's the game plan.
I don't know if that's fortitude or discipline or dumb luck, or we just get the right guests to come together with us. But I'd like to share one thing with you, Joe, as a supporter of some of the things that I've done personally. We were out this weekend with the AnnieMac Cash to Keys Top Alcohol Dragster.
Yes.
And for the first time ever in my career, I was the number 1 qualifier. And we were pretty excited about that. We came right out of the box with a 525 at 271 mile an hour. And my father, who's part of our team, was, beyond the moon. And I wanted to say, thanks for giving us a purpose and a reason and being able to share the message, because I've used that to help stay connected on many different levels. So we appreciate all you've done together to help us rise together.
Sincerely, I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much, Joe. We really appreciate it. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us with Joe Panebianco, the founder of AnnieMac Mortgage. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, folks.